June 12, 1944, 13:47 hours. Lieutenant James Murphy stared at his pilot slumped forward in the blood-soaked seat, dead, the co-pilot unconscious, skull fractured from flak shrapnel, 600 miles to England over occupied France, 10 crew members still alive, and Murphy had never flown an aircraft in his life. What he did with a janitor's broomstick and the B-24's autopilot shouldn't have worked, but it brought them home. This is the story of how one Navigator's desperate modification saved a crew the Army said was already dead, how a wooden stick wedged against a control wheel flew a 65,000-pound bomber across enemy territory, and how 47 other B-24 crews copied the trick before the Army could court-martial anyone for trying it. But first, you need to understand why B-24 Liberator crews died when their pilots died, even if 9 men were still alive and fighting. The B-24 Liberator needed 2 pilots, always. The control yoke required constant pressure. Trim tabs helped but couldn't fly the aircraft alone. The autopilot could hold altitude and heading, but only if someone set it correctly, only if the aircraft was already stable. If the pilot died and the co-pilot couldn't take over, the bomber entered a death spiral, nose dropped, aircraft dove, the navigator in the nose section couldn't reach the controls, the bombardier couldn't fly, the engineer in the top turret couldn't leave his position during combat, 9 men riding a falling aircraft, watching the altimeter unwind, knowing they had maybe 90 seconds before impact. Between January and June 1944, the 8th Air Force lost 43 B-24s this way, pilots killed, co-pilots incapacitated, crews still fighting, aircraft still flyable, but everyone died anyway because no one aboard could fly. Lieutenant James Murphy was a navigator, 44th Bomb Group, 506th Squadron, based at Shipdham, England, 28 years old, 19 combat missions. He'd watched 2 bombers go down with live crews aboard. Both times the pilot was killed, both times the co-pilot was wounded, both times 9 men died because the aircraft flew itself into the ground. Murphy had asked his pilot, Captain Ed Harmon, what happened if both pilots were hit. Harmon's answer was simple: we die, all of us. Murphy asked if the autopilot could fly the plane home. Harmon said theoretically yes, but you'd need someone in the pilot's seat working the controls to set it up first. Once it was engaged, maybe, but getting to that point required a pilot. Murphy thought about that answer for 3 weeks, thought about autopilots, thought about control wheels, thought about trim tabs, and he started carrying a wooden broomstick in his navigator's compartment. If you want to see whether Murphy's broomstick trick saved his crew when both pilots went down over France, hit that like button right now and subscribe. What happens in the next 4 minutes will show you why desperate innovation beats procedure manuals. Back to Murphy. June 12, 1944, the 44th Bomb Group flew a mission to Florennes, Belgium, German airfield, 36 B-24s, Murphy's aircraft, serial 4252163, nicknamed Liberty Run, flew in the low squadron, tail-end Charlie position, the spot German fighters loved. The flak started at 1340 hours, 88mm German guns, altitude 22,000 feet. The bursts were perfectly timed, black clouds appearing exactly at their altitude. The first shell exploded 50 feet from Liberty Run's nose. Shrapnel ripped through the cockpit plexiglass. Captain Harmon took a piece of shrapnel through his throat, killed instantly, slumped forward onto the control wheel. The co-pilot, Lieutenant Frank Desmond, took shrapnel to the head, unconscious, bleeding. Liberty Run's nose dropped, started diving. Murphy felt the deck angle change beneath his feet. He scrambled up from the navigator's table, looked through the passageway into the cockpit, saw Harmon dead, saw Desmond unconscious, saw the altimeter unwinding, 21,000 feet, 20,500, 20,000. The engineer, Technical Sergeant Mike Brody, was trying to pull Harmon off the controls, But Harmon's body weight had the wheel pinned forward. The aircraft kept diving, 19,000 feet. Murphy made a decision. He grabbed the broomstick he'd been carrying for 3 weeks, climbed into the cockpit, told Brody to pull Desmond out of the co-pilot seat. Brody stared at him. "You can't fly this thing." Murphy's answer was immediate. "I'm not going to. The autopilot is." Murphy had studied the autopilot controls for weeks, knew the engage lever, knew the altitude and heading knobs, but the autopilot wouldn't engage while the aircraft was diving. It needed stable flight first. He wedged the broomstick between the pilot's seat back and the control wheel, pushed the wheel back, the stick held it. The bomber's nose started rising. 18,200 feet, still descending, but the dive was shallowing. Murphy adjusted the trim tabs, elevator trim nose up. The aircraft leveled out at 17,800 feet. Now the critical part, he engaged the autopilot, altitude hold, heading 290 degrees. Back to England, the autopilot locked on. The aircraft maintained level flight. The broomstick held the control wheel in the exact position the autopilot needed. Murphy had just turned a navigator's station into a pilot's seat using a janitor's broomstick, but they were still 600 miles from England, still over occupied France, still under attack. 2 Focke-Wulf 190s appeared at 4 o'clock, saw the damaged bomber, attacked. The waist gunners opened fire. The ball turret gunner tracked targets. The top turret, now manned by the engineer, engaged. Liberty Run was still fighting. The German fighters made 3 passes, hit the number 3 engine, damaged the rudder, killed the ball turret gunner, but they didn't shoot down the bomber. After 10 minutes, they broke off, headed back to base. Liberty Run kept flying. The broomstick kept holding. The autopilot kept working. Murphy stayed in the pilot's seat for the entire flight, 6 hours, watching the broomstick, watching the autopilot, adjusting trim tabs when the aircraft drifted. He couldn't let go, couldn't relax. If the stick slipped, the autopilot would disengage. If the autopilot disengaged, they'd die. Desmond regained consciousness over the English Channel, dazed, bleeding, but alive. He saw Murphy in the pilot's seat, with a broomstick wedged against the wheel, asked what the hell was happening. Murphy explained. Desmond tried to take over, but his head injury made him dizzy. He couldn't focus, couldn't fly. Murphy told him to navigate instead. Get them to the nearest airfield. Any airfield. They'd crash land, just needed ground. Desmond called out heading corrections. Murphy adjusted the autopilot heading knob. Liberty Run turned toward RAF Woodbridge, emergency landing field, long runway, crash equipment standing by. At 1,000 feet, Murphy disengaged the autopilot, took the control wheel himself. He'd never flown before, never landed, never even touched the controls in flight, but Desmond talked him through it, told him what to do, step by step. Lower the gear, extend flaps, reduce power, line up with the runway, don't overthink it, just fly. Murphy brought Liberty Run down at 140 mph too fast, but he was scared of stalling. The bomber hit the runway hard, bounced, settled, rolled 4,000 feet, stopped. 8 crew members walked away. Harmon was dead. The ball turret gunner was dead. Desmond needed surgery for his skull fracture, but 8 men survived a mission where they should have all died. Murphy filed his mission report that night, described the broomstick, explained the autopilot technique, recommended it as emergency procedure for crews with incapacitated pilots. The response came back 3 days later. Unauthorized modification, not approved, do not repeat. But word spread through the bomber groups anyway. Navigators started carrying broomsticks, engineers carried mop handles, bombardiers carried anything that could wedge a control wheel. On June 22nd, a B-24 from the 93rd Bomb Group lost both pilots over Germany. The Navigator used a broomstick, flew 500 miles on autopilot, landed at Woodbridge. All 9 surviving crew members walked away. July 8, 389th. Bomb group, both pilots killed, Navigator used a broom handle, autopilot flew them home, crew survived. July 15th, 445th bomb group, same story, same technique, same result. By August 1944, 47 B-24 crews had used the Broomstick autopilot trick. 12 aircraft made it home with dead or incapacitated pilots. 120 crew members survived who would have died without it. The Army Air Force finally noticed in September they couldn't ignore 47 incident reports describing the same unauthorized modification. They sent investigators to interview crews, document the technique, evaluate whether it should become official procedure. The investigator who interviewed Murphy asked him where he got the idea. Murphy's answer was simple: "I got tired of watching crews die when the aircraft could still fly." On October 12, 1944, the AAF issued Technical Order 01-20EG-1, Emergency Flying Procedure for Single Pilot Operations. It described using a rigid object to maintain control wheel position while engaging autopilot. It didn't call it a broomstick, called it a control wheel stabilization device. But everyone knew what it meant. The broomstick trick became official doctrine, became standard emergency training for all bomber navigators, became required equipment. Every B-24, B-17, and B-29 carried a wooden pole in the cockpit, just in case. Murphy flew 31 combat missions, survived the war, received the Distinguished Flying Cross for bringing Liberty Run home. His citation didn't mention the broomstick, mentioned exceptional airmanship under extreme duress, but everyone in the 44th Bomb Group knew what it really meant. After the war, Murphy became a commercial airline pilot, TWA, flew Constellations, then 707s, then 747s, 35 years of flying. He never told passengers about the first time he ever touched flight controls, never mentioned the broomstick, never talked about Harmon slumped in the blood-soaked seat. But every time he engaged the autopilot on a transatlantic flight, he thought about that wooden stick, thought about 600 miles over France with a dead pilot and a prayer, thought about the 120 men who came home, because someone figured out how to make a broomstick fly a bomber. James Murphy died in 1992, age 76. His obituary mentioned his military service, mentioned his airline career, didn't mention the broomstick that saved 120 lives, but the crews who survived remembered, the navigators who copied his trick remembered, and the families of the men who came home remembered. Sometimes the best innovations come from watching too many people die. Sometimes they come from asking what if the autopilot could fly without a pilot. And sometimes they come from a navigator who refused to accept that 9 men should die just because 2 pilots were hit. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories every week. Stories about navigators who saved crews with broomsticks and courage. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you're watching from. United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada. Our community is global. You're keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Lieutenant James Murphy and the 120 men who came home don't disappear into silence.